Hi, I'm Toby Sowery, driver of the number 51 Dale Coyne Racing IndyCar, and this is the DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast.
Welcome back to DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast and another very special episode of the podcast because once again we are joined by another driver, this time one of the drivers of the number 51 Dale Coyne Racing with Rick Racing car, joined by Toby Sowery this week. So Toby, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you on this week.
No, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate the time.
So obviously you raced out in Toronto, and as I said, you've obviously had a race in Germany at Nürburgring, but what have you spent sort of your 3 or 4 weeks off doing? Anything exciting at all?
Well, planning for next year. Obviously, racing's kind of, for me, has always been a last-minute deal, trying to figure out where and what we race. So it's kind of trying to be ahead of the curve this year and really focus on putting a strong season together again for 2025, but as early as we can. Obviously, this year being kind of fortunate, I've got 3 fantastic programs. Obviously, the 3 races with Dale in IndyCar, which is, a long project that we've had, and thankfully Dale's allowed us to have that opportunity to kind of race and show myself. I've obviously had the CrowdStrike IMSA program, which has been fantastic so far. Everyone's been amazing at welcoming me and introducing me to the IMSA endurance racing world, and then obviously Fanatec GT World Challenge Europe with BMW and Darren Leung and Century Motorsport. So trying to get that sort of program again lined up for next year, but earlier than say March and February. Winters drag on, especially without racing, and when you haven't got anything lined up, it adds that other element of itchiness and eagerness to sort things out. So for me and everyone on my team, it's putting that together for next year.
We'll also get onto that a bit more later. You've been relaxing, any time to relax at all, getting away from the motorsport scene?
This summer break, actually I have. The last kind of 6-7 weeks beforehand have been, kind of hectic. One weekend straight into another. Sunday flight to test kind of Monday, Tuesday. Straight after the race weekend, it's been exhausting, especially when you've thrown, endurance races like CrowdStrike Spa 24 hours, Watkins 6 hours. They do take a physical toll, and, jet lag is a big deal. We're athletes, we're meant to be performing at the top of our level, and unfortunately, jet lag and sleeping on planes doesn't help that too much. So these kind of 2-3 weeks I've had off has been, getting back to full health, getting down to the gym, catching up on sleep, and just making sure that when back at Portland next weekend, I'm as healthy and as fit as I can be.
Sorry to interrupt everyone, but we have a very exciting announcement.
Courtesy of Formula Model Shop, you have the chance to enter a giveaway to win a pair of Toby's signed race-worn gloves and boots.
To enter, head to our socials at DIVEBOMB Motorsport on Instagram, which we've collabed with at Formula Model Shop. For 1 point, comment the hashtag Toby Sowery IndyCar. For 2 points, share it on your story and put the hashtag Toby Sowery IndyCar. Or for 3 points, create a post with the hashtag Toby Sowery IndyCar. Or you can head to our X at DIVEBOMB Motorsport, where you can do exactly the same and earn the same amount of points.
You can use the discount code 5BOMB, or one word, FIVEBOMB, to gain 5% off products on the FMS site. You can find the FMS site via a banner on the DIVEBOMB website or by visiting formulamodelshop.co.uk.
Huge thanks to Formula Model Shop for running this, and huge thanks for Toby for giving away his signed goods. Now back to the rest of the episode.
Yeah, so where did your interest in motorsport kind of begin, and how did that pursue into a career in karting and later on in motorsport?
Honestly, I think everyone has like this incredible story of how they first, fell in love with racing. But for me, it wasn't anything spectacular. It was just, I think my dad had an old Formula Ford in a garage when I was maybe 2 or 3. And I think that was the first time I'd ever realized what anything with wheels was apart from a road car. But again, at that age, you don't really pay attention. And then it just transpired from karting, like karting parties when you're like 6 or 7. It's, one kid goes to the water park, another kid plays football, another one has like a little house party, and another one has karting. And for me, it was a birthday party karting. And I think from that point, I kind of had a love for driving. And although I didn't realize it, it was something that I wanted to do. Like every time I got a weekend off or an opportunity to do something, that's what I wanted to do. So I think that was my first kind of introduction to anything motorsport related, but I was so young, it wasn't a process of this is what I want to do and this is how I want to spend my life. It was just I love doing it.
And I read that you raced against the likes of Lando Norris and George Russell back in your karting days, even Colton Herta getting into your early car racing days. Do you have any memories of kind of racing against them early on? And how do you feel like you stacked up against them back in the day?
Yeah, I mean, I always laugh because to get to this level and go against the drivers that I have, you've got some incredible talents. And I feel like there's waves and generations that you get a lot of drivers come through. And I think I've been mixed up in that. So I've been incredibly fortunate to, race against these guys. And I feel like it's been great training because the bar's always so high with them that every time I've had to go up against them, it's had to be up to that sort of level as well. George, I've kind of known, not massively well, but I've known of him and raced against him since, we were like 8 or 9. And I think Lando's a few years younger, but I always remember him being so small. Obviously, if you ask anyone kind of when he was growing up, he was just this tiny little lad. Very good initially, straight away, he was fast. And I think obviously because he was so much smaller than everyone else, he kind of attracted everyone's attention. So he kind of had the spotlight quite early. George went out and won straight away, so he was very good. Again, always had the momentum behind him of success. So they're both incredible drivers, and it's always difficult going up against guys like that. They've got everything going for them and the talent as well. So it's always a task, but it's to be the best, you've got to compete against the best. So I've been very fortunate with that. And like you said, Colton, he was in, I want to say MSA Formula, it was called at the time. Came over again. I didn't know who he was. He probably didn't know who I was. Well, he definitely wouldn't have known who I was. And yeah, it's just looking back at the drivers that you end up racing against and then get to this top level of racing with. It's interesting how early you start coming across them. Leist was in MSA Formula and then British or BRDCF3 at the time as well. So there's all these drivers that have kind of gone up against and raced against and battled away with that. At the time you're thinking, don't care, just want to beat them. And then you kind of get to this level of racing and you're like, remember 10 years ago when we were racing at Brands Hatch in the cold or whatever. So I've been very fortunate to grow up with these talents, but hasn't made it easy.
Before we sort of delve into your life into America, as we sort of stick in Britain and Europe, can you sort of take us through the process of how your car racing journey was over there and some of the years racing at home?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very different world to American racing over here in Europe. Just the style and the mentality and kind of how the weekends work are very different. So for me, it was an early introduction of kind of European racing. That's where obviously England is, and it's kind of the same across all of Europe. The infrastructure is the same. So it's a very natural process to get into. And it's been up and down for me for sure. There's been years off, years on, 3 races 1 year, 2 seasons as the same program. So it's been up and down, but I mean, I feel lucky that I've done what I've done. Those are obviously some things I feel like I've missed out on. I'd have loved to have done some FIA single-seaters, but at the same time, everything that, like I mentioned earlier, I have done, I've had to go up against guys like Lando, guys like George, and it's not so much that I've missed out, it's just a big platform that I never really got to in Europe. And then I literally got a random phone call from an English guy that had done some Formula or MSA Formula stuff in the UK, who was running a program in USF 2000. USF 2000 it was called back then. I think it still is. But he literally, again, went over to America himself and then said, we've got this race, do you want to come do it? And that's kind of my introduction to America. It was just a one-off, go explore over there, see how it is, see what's different, and just see if it was something that, I could pursue as a career. And here we are. Never really looked back.
And, I was reading through your kind of racing record and saw those occasional races in USF 2000. And was it USF Pro 2000, or at least that's what it is now, the year after? Yeah. Kind of what were your first impressions of that? And I guess just how valuable was that for you, that experience in a different country, doing something that, where kind of the racing culture is quite different?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the first thing I always remember is getting really cheesed off about my helmet. Like, you're not allowed to run a spoiler on the helmet, as I'm sure you're probably all aware. And as drivers, that's kind of something we take pride in, like making a helmet look the snazziest, what we think looks the best. And it's a real personal touch. So I went over there, got this new helmet that I'd been using for that year. And the first thing they did is rip the spoiler off. And it's like, what on earth is this? Like, I remember having a bit of a bicker with the guy who did it. And we're actually very good friends now. He's in the IndyCar paddock as well. And he didn't like me at the time and I didn't like him at the time. He had a bit of a headbutt over it. But that was my first kind of reality check that it's different, you know, like they have different rules. There's different thoughts and procedures behind it. And the other thing I remember doing is driving through the paddock. Obviously in USF, you're kind of at the lower end of the ladder system, if you like. And normally the cars are kind of pushed to a staging area, or they're in the garage straight onto the pit lane in Europe. So driving through, you know, crowds and people and pit carts and golf carts and everything, it's a bit like, oh, okay, what's going on here? So it was a very different procedure through the weekend, which, you know, kind of took me off guard a little bit. But the racing is just as good as anywhere else, you know. I like to explain it as a bit more of a raw kind of racing. It's if you push someone off, don't be there kind of thing. And they're not as eager to penalize you for something when, you know, they probably could be a bit more lenient in some cases. But I think it's kind of, I don't want to say old school because I feel like people take that negatively, but it's more old school regulation. And as if you do clash wheels, it's kind of sort out, guys. Like, you know, we'll kind of take an input when it's too much, but, you know, go out there and have a race.
Yeah. How long had you been an IndyCar kind of watcher before you first raced in the US? And how does that kind of come on a radar for someone who's in the UK when obviously it's kind of in the US?
Yeah, for me, again, I didn't really know anything American racing. I knew of IndyCar, but it wasn't something that was on my radar as such. Again, like in Europe, you don't get as much advertisements for anything IndyCar. Everything's F1, you know, and that's kind of very much a English and European outlook. So I think when I went over there and saw them and heard them and smelt them, if you like, that's when it was like, oh, okay, these are pretty cool. And I think that was when, for me, it kind of opened up that route where if you do well with the ladder system that go out there, which is fantastic, it could be somewhere that I could get to. And unfortunately, I never won any of the categories, so I've had to do it the hard way. But, you know, there's a lot more willingness to help out here, out there in America, that gives drivers the opportunities. I mean, you wouldn't see this rotation of IndyCar drivers through an F1 team, which is good and is bad in its own respects, but, you know, it gives guys like me a chance.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm guessing the initial goal, as with pretty much any young racing driver in the UK, was F1. But like,
yeah,
after your time in the British Championships, going a bit elsewhere as well, how did you come to the decision to then pursue Indy Lights and kind of go full time there in 2019? And I guess how valuable were those pieces of success you had in USF Pro 2000 and those couple of races? How valuable was that?
Well, it's difficult. I don't know as such how valuable my results were in the previous categories. Obviously, Road America was a better race out of the two in the lower categories for me, but I think there was a point where I was racing BRDCF3 at the time, it was called, and we kind of looked at what we could raise, what routes we could do in single seaters, and it was kind of FIA F3, or that's it. And we certainly didn't have the budget for that, and I don't think we had the resources to fund the sponsorship either. So we'd actually gone back to the GT route, which I was having a great time with. I was part of the Lamborghini junior drivers, which, you know, for me was quite a big thing at the time. And again, it was a very similar situation to how the previous two category races in America had gone. I literally got the phone call completely out of the blue from the same guy who ran me in Indy Pro, saying, did you want to do St. Petersburg in Indy Lights? Obviously, the answer was yes. It was on the cheaper side because the guy who owned the car is Dale Pelfrey, who used to obviously run Pelfrey Racing, wanted to see his car at his home event. So he put some money into it. The team also helped pick up a bit of the cost as well to help David have a teammate and learn and kind of have more resources for the weekend. And basically we said, yeah, we'll give it a go. And honestly, it wasn't like a commitment to Indy Lights at the time. It was just, we'll go do this one race. It's going to be a steep learning curve, but you never know what will come from it. If we go there and, get a podium, fantastic. That's kind of what the goal was. And we did a shakedown at Homestead the week before and it went terribly. The car hadn't been out the truck, for 2 or 3 years. So the thing was taken apart. It was put all back together as quick as they could. And we missed, kind of the first half of the morning getting the car back together. Did a shakedown and install run, kind of just to get used to the car and make sure everything was right before lunch. And then we had a few runs in the afternoon where we were pretty slow. So again, it was just this one weekend that we had as a whole sorted. And then, we turned up to St. Pete, first time on a street course, first time at that track, first time in that car. It was like baptism of fire again, almost a bit like the IndyCar race, but with even less prep somehow. We managed to get 2 podiums and nearly win one of the races. So I think that then sparked a few people to get excited and put a bit of money behind me. And we managed to just each weekend chip away and figure out, how to stay in per weekend. So it wasn't, again, like I said, a commitment to going to America, but it soon became a reality that there was a career that, if things pan out right, we could chase.
Yeah, can you speak a little bit about kind of the adaptations that you had to go through in order to excel at oval races as well as kind of road and straight?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so obviously in Europe everything is all as Americans call it road courses. So they're very, very easy to adapt to. It's very much what you're used to, minus a few overtaking safety car rules. But the ovals, honestly, there are 2 very different nature of ovals in my eyes. There's the high speed, like the super speedways, and then the short ovals. And yeah, they're both ovals, but the approach is very different. One, you take all the air off and you've got high banking, high speed, and it's honestly a little bit more comfortable. I think the car does a lot more of the work, but the majority of the courses compared to, say, somewhere like Gateway, I've never really had a good time at Gateway. But again, I feel like they're much more of a driver input oval compared to some of the others. Whereas, like in Indy, for example, when we did the Freedom 100, it's a lot of it comes down to the car. Qualifying, yeah, a driver can make a bit of difference, but we were flat out from leaving the pit lane and we had two or three laps, I think. So, there's 2 different beasts, if you like. And for me, I think the high speed bankings, like the super speedways, are incredibly fun. Not so fond of the short ovals, but I think, what it's like when you have a bad race, your love for them goes. But it's very different to anything that I think any European driver will have done. You sit off center in the car slightly, your head's off center, the steering wheel's a different way to normal. Down the straights, the thing's pulling quite hard, but in the corners, it's quite happy. So it's a completely backwards driving style to what you're used to. But again, I think just build up to it, have a day to kind of chip away, and it becomes fairly explanatory. It's just understanding where to push and how to push. That's the key difference. If you attack the corner and drive it quite physically and aggressively, it doesn't really work. So you've got to be disciplined with what you do, but also at the same time aggressive. And it's a very fine margin that is. And I think that's why some drivers struggle and some don't.
You raced in what seems to be the last ever Freedom 100. So how special was it racing on the Indianapolis Oval? I know it's all down to sort of political reasons, but do you still think that race deserves a place on the Indy Next schedule?
I'd like to say no, because then I was part of the spectacle of the last one from a selfish standpoint. But from a spectators, I think it should come back 100%. It's an incredible race, and yeah, it's not the Indy 500, but in some ways it's a kind of compressed version, and sometimes it's even more exciting. You've got 4 wide for a lot of the race. you only have to look back at Peter Dempsey's win when it was 4 wide, and you see that everywhere still, and it was 12, 13 years ago or something like that. So I think it should come back. It was an incredible experience doing that. It was my first ever oval race, so for me it was a bit of a daunting challenge, kind of going down the straight in a tow with 5 or 6 cars around at like 220 miles an hour in the race I think we achieved. And it was a bit of a wake-up call of we're traveling at some speeds now, everything has to be precise. And there was a bit of a contact on my end with a guy called Robert McGuinness at the time, and I don't think we were best of mates after that. But it's funny, it's a special race, and I think if it ever gets the opportunity to come back, I think it will. I'm not sure why it did disappear. I have heard different things, but I don't know, it's all speculation. But it's an incredible event to race on the Indy Speedway. Not many people get to do that, and especially not in a lights car now. So I think it should come back and let people have some fun again.
And we've got 2 British drivers full-time in Indy next this year. We've had 3 at points at the start of the year. There's 2 Irishmen as well, and the grid sizes are really starting to increase again. How would you assess the American open wheel ladder kind of as an option for younger drivers from our side of the pond? And what do you see as being the big appeal that is kind of meaning the grid sizes are increasing again and we're getting more people from over in Europe going over?
Yeah, I mean, it's great to see the grid grow. Like when I first did lights in 2019, there was, like 9 cars on average. Sometimes they'd have 11, and it was still super tough, but like outside of the top 5, things would kind of tail off. So I think it was its own worst enemy in that regard. And I think when drivers have come over and realized, it's not just American racing on ovals, there's a much more in-depth calendar than what people give credit for. And I think people started to realize that, and obviously HMD have opened that door for people to jump in and step in and have a seat. So I think the fact it's a snowball effect both ways. I think when you get more drivers interested in it and doing it, more drivers become interested. No one wants to race against 7 people. Obviously, FIA F3 is 30 odd cars every single race. And I think that is also a little bit of a play in lights doing so well, because if you look anywhere in the world, kind of outside of FIA stuff, what can you do? Oh, you can do in the NXT. So I think it's a great alternative. And I think a lot of people, myself included, Jack Harvey before me, I think a lot of European guys going over to lights and making a career in IndyCar kind of woke people up and saying, if I can't get to F1, if I can't get to F2 or F3, there's still this incredible series that I can do to progress to IndyCar. So it's good to see a lot of people come over. And obviously now we've got a lot of F2 guys, XF1. So it's getting really tough. And I think that's just, a kind of a credit to what the guys have done, what the series have put together as a package for drivers and fans. And, it's growing massively. I think a lot more interest is coming back this side of the pond. And, I'd love for there to be as much of a love for IndyCar as there is F1.
Yeah, the 2019 Indy Lights season was very strong. You had a race win under your belt and kind of 3rd in the championship. Can you kind of talk us through the season, in fact, by going kind of race to race?
Yeah, I mean, it's never easy, and it's never nice knowing if you're going to do the next one or when the next one will be. But I think everyone at that time was eager to keep me in, 1, because of the series having such low numbers, and 2, because the team didn't want to have just a single driver. They'd like to have the 2 and kind of really progress the team into something that's title worthy, because at the time we were going up against Andretti, and they were almost untouchable. They were the serious IndyCar team that have got an Indy Lights team. So the knowledge kind of fed down, whereas everyone else was kind of stepping up to lights, looking at what their package is. So there was motivation for me to be there on a lot of different angles. But it was tough, like we had to work a lot outside of the race weekends to make sure I was there. But the team at the time, which turned into HMD, were, incredible. They gave me a good car. considering their lack of experience. And, the Portland race wasn't a lucky win. It wasn't something that, we kind of stayed on track and other people crashed and we inherited the win. We fought for the win and we got a genuine win. And I think that was kind of impressive considering, Yonkos at the time were incredible in lights. Andretti were incredible in lights, and we kind of managed to beat them on merit. Yeah, with a few, little bits here and there, as Portland always throws up. But at the same time, you have to survive that to get in that position. And yeah, I think that win actually helped my career in America a lot. Everyone can get in the top 5, but to actually secure a win when, have to defend and overtake for it, it changes people's perspective. So for me, I think it was a big moment.
And then obviously the next year things were different for obvious reasons with the pandemic, and you had half a weekend in St. Pete and that was about it. So how did this kind of alter your plans going forward, essentially like putting you out of racing for that year? How did that kind of alter things? Yeah,
I mean, there's not much we could do on that. And unfortunately, Bilardi, who I'd signed up to race with, completely shut down. So it kind of left us 100% out of a seat. And looking back now, I think it actually did more damage than we gave it credit for at the time. It was like, we'll just miss a season, come back next year. But it really kind of stopped the momentum and I don't want to say hype, but hype that people had for year 2. And I think that's quite a powerful tool. When you've got momentum and people are excited to see you back in the car, it definitely helps a lot of different aspects that lead to you being in a car again. So looking back, I think it was, I wouldn't say detrimental, but it definitely didn't help. But again, for me, it was kind of not unknown. I've had periods out of a race seat. So for me, it was just focusing on trying to get back into a car for 2021. And we managed to do that. So there was no problems there. But again, what can you do, right? The world shuts down. We can't take priority over that. Unfortunately, we were one of the only series that did get completely cancelled for whatever purpose and reason. But it is what it is. It's, a couple of years ago now and we're back on track. So it's a shame, but yeah, I would have liked to have done that season for sure.
And then you came back in 2021, as you said, for the majority of the season. Then 2022, you sort of had a year on the sidelines. What was the situation that period? Were you confident that you'd return to racing at some point?
Yeah, no matter what we did, we were going to find a way back to racing. It was just going back to some racing that I wanted to do. Like I said earlier, momentum is quite important. So when you have a average season and then you kind of run out of budget to do the end of the season and then you don't have another year racing, it's kind of almost 2 years on the back foot. So then trying to get anything to build your momentum back up is quite difficult, which I think any driver would struggle with, especially when you haven't got the money just to go pay the check, jump into something serious again and kind of not worry about it. For me, everything we do has to be quite calculated and we have to be smart with how we raise and where we spend the money. So it was definitely a matter of when, not if, we get back into a car, but at the same time, it's trying to make it a valuable step, which I think, the Radical World Finals we ended up doing and winning that, I think that was a good start. And then going back into Indy NXT with HMD and, straight away getting a podium, I think kind of restarted the ball. So it was tough. Again, I'd had 2020 out of the car. So, having 2022 was only a year different. So it wasn't nice. It wasn't pleasant, but I'd gone through it before.
And kind of continuing on that theme of momentum, and you mentioned 2023, like I think you were in place of Josh Pearson, were you, for those few races? Yep. But like, how important was that just in terms of kind of having your name in circulation in the IndyCar paddock? Was that kind of an important part of it?
Yeah, massively. It was the whole purpose. HMD came to me, like, I've got a lot of time and respect for the team. They've obviously given me a platform to win in 2019 and they've always been very close friends, So to get back into the car and instantly do well and get a podium and be on the pace, that's kind of, I think, what re-established my name over there. If I jumped in and come 15th and struggled and crashed, I think people would have been like, past, like, there's no next opportunity. So every time you get in the car, for someone that doesn't have years and years and years to kind of practice and worry, it's making sure that these efforts count. And I think, like I said, jumping in and being fast and being competitive and showing, even with a year out, I'm still able to hold my ground and stand up. It's important. So Barber for me, I think, was again very important. And it just, again, like I said, reestablished my name in a paddock that I want to make a career in.
And, clearly the path you were taking in the US was leading you to IndyCar, but what are the kind of emotions and the frustrations when that opportunity doesn't open up and then you have to kind of explore avenues elsewhere? I know a career in sports cars is great, but if IndyCar is the thing that you are targeting, like, when do you make that decision and how hard is it to make that sort of deviation?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very difficult one. Obviously, everyone, like I said, wants to either go to F1 or now IndyCar is becoming more popular. So you've always got the rough idea of where you want to go, but at the same time, unfortunately, I can't just buy my way into anywhere. I can't just go pay to race. So, like you said, it's important to really judge and decide what's best for your career, even if it's not something that you would choose first. And obviously this year I've done LMP2 with CrowdStrike APR, and it's been fantastic. I've loved every moment of it. It's incredible racing, but again, it's a bit of a different one sharing a car, like you can hand the car over and then something happens out of your control. And there's that element of frustration, which obviously in single seaters you don't get. But at the same time, it's also, you get a little bit more camaraderie with your teammates, and it's different for different aspects. But again, it's just how you juggle the situation. It's like any other career. You've got to be smart and kind of think long term rather than short term. So it's not easy, but I think if you kind of take your emotion out and think long term, things become a lot clearer.
Yeah, you raced the Asian Le Mans Series and the GT World Challenge Europe recently, among other sports car endeavours from quite early in your career. How important a part of your career has that become, whilst also chasing more open wheel opportunities?
Definitely an asset that I can leverage more seats from, because anyone with the means can jump in a race car and have lots and lots and lots of practice and then do well. Not taking that away from the people that do, but sometimes drivers don't get that opportunity. So to jump in something and be fast straight away is how I would measure talent personally. Everyone has their own metrics, but for me, being able to jump in a car and be competitive kind of with no experience is something I've had to do, and that's how I see someone as talented. And I think managers and team owners and people who kind of make decisions also see it that way. And I think for building a career and wherever I end up, hopefully IndyCar, if not sports cars, will be fantastic. If not, the GT route's still there. But I think people do pay attention when you go from one discipline of racing straight into another with no practice and do well. They go, oh, okay, he can drive anything. It's not just he's had a good weekend or the car just fitted him that weekend. It's kind of, you put him in a car and he gets a result. And I think that's what people want. As a team manager, you want someone that you're going to put in the car and they're going to deliver, not crash, not be steady, not be slow. On their worst weekends, yeah, okay, they might not win, but they're still there carrying a fairly good result, because that's what wins the championships. It's not the best weekends, it's the worst. So for me, I think it's been massively beneficial this year. And, everyone who's allowed me to drive their car this year has been probably a massive key player in establishing myself and giving myself a career. And like I said, a few years ago, I didn't realize how much COVID had an effect on my career. I think in 5 years' time, I'm going to look back at this year and say, that was the year where I established myself, and that was, what allowed me to have a career.
It's time to get onto the IndyCar stuff now. So obviously you tested IndyCar for the first time last year with RLL.
Yep.
How did that opportunity come about? Like, what was that experience like? And I guess, did that just further grow your ambition to make that step up to IndyCar if you could in any way possible?
Yeah, obviously the kind of primary reason to do the Indy NXT races was to get my name back out there, but it was also secondhand prep for the IndyCar test, which we had. If you want to go and drive an IndyCar, but you can't, the next best thing is an Indy NXT. You know, it's built as a IndyCar preparation tool. So it was amazing. It was at Sebring, which, you know, obviously is a short track and you want to do a bigger track and spend more time with the car, but you kind of have to do with what you've got. And, you know, RLL did a fantastic job in bringing me in, welcoming me, prepping the car extremely well. So we didn't have any interruptions, but it was hot, physical, sweaty, but not as much as I expected it to be. I remember driving down the back straight and just thinking, man, I'm driving an IndyCar, like, enjoy this day. Like, yeah, we've got a job to do, and, you know, yeah, I've got certain things I need to achieve in myself and for the team, but man, you're driving an IndyCar, like, enjoy it. And I can just remember the day just flew past. And it was something that, again, like you said, it reestablishes that fire, because you get so close to it and so desensitized to that world because you spend all your time around the cars that it's easy just to kind of go, oh, okay, it's just an IndyCar. But when you're driving it, it's kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, actually, I really want to do this. And this is what we've worked so hard for. And to get here, it's kind of surreal, but at the same time, not letting it go to your head, not letting it get in the way of, at the end of the day, it's just another race car, you know, like, yes, it's an IndyCar, but it's still got an engine and four wheels and brakes and steering wheel, and you just have to do the job, you know, despite what the car is. So for me, it was an incredible day. I'll probably never forget it. And obviously it took a while to get another chance in IndyCar, but same thing again, you know, first practice session where everyone's sitting in the pit box, engines are on, you get the 1 minute sign. You're like, oh crap, like here we go. Like, this is the serious time now. So it's something I'll never forget. But again, like you said, IndyCar is fantastic. It's getting tougher to get in. So I'm trying to establish myself every time I go out there.
And after that test, at the end of last year, there was a rumour flying about that you might race with the team in Portland or Laguna, before it was announced to be Yuri Vips. Were there ever discussions over this? Was this ever a potential for you?
Yeah, there was. You know, we still have a good relationship with RLL. There's nothing... I'm not salty about Yuri getting the race. You know, everyone gets picked for a reason. Everyone gets chosen for a certain purpose. And they decided that Yuri was the guy for that. And there was conversations about racing with him for this season, but, you know, our sponsorship deal kind of fell through, and that is what it is. You know, I've had that happen many times. There's people who've got to IndyCar way sooner than me. Like you said, Lando and George are in F1, and you're kind of sitting back way behind this, watching everyone else get their opportunities. So it's easy to get kind of wound up and upset about that, but at the same time, it's not productive. So you just kind of focus on, accept that people get there sooner. Doesn't mean they're better or worse. It just, people have different routes. And yeah, there was definitely conversations about racing with them. They obviously didn't happen, but we've still got a great relationship with RLL. It's, you know, we didn't fall out or anything. It didn't happen, and that's racing. You know, lots of things don't happen for a lot of drivers. So it's good to see that he's got another race this year. I'll be out there on track with him, so you know, we'll be out there having fun together at the same time. But again, there's uncertainty of who's going to be there next year. There's uncertainty with a lot of seats next year. Obviously, David announcing his move to Foyt has kind of thrown a lot more in the air than people were expecting. So I think no one's your enemy at this point, you know. No matter if you're falling out with a team, they're still your friends. Like, you've got to put the past to the side and just kind of work on building these relationships and futures for any seats that, you know, drivers can get.
Yeah, well, finally, your shot kind of came around at Mid-Ohio. How did that kind of come around with Dale? And did you kind of see it as an opportunity at Coyne with that revolving the number 51 car? Like, did you approach the team, or did the team approach you? How did that kind of work?
Honestly, I'm not too sure of the early details because there were conversations at the same time that my IMSA teammate Colin Brown had as well. So again, like I said, you can't be salty. He was my teammate and he went to do an IndyCar race and I didn't. So there was conversations at the time and I thought, yeah, it's probably going to be an unrealistic shot, but you never know. So got to be ready. And yeah, I think there was a conversation because he hadn't had a commitment for the whole season for the 51 car. So I think Dale and his team were analysing and assessing who they could get and who's good and valuable and who's a trusted driver, if you like. So there was a conversation, but didn't come to fruition. And I think because of that conversation, the name being in his mind already, there was that bridge was kind of a lot easier to make rather than some random person that he'd never spoke to. But again, it just came about as an opportunity. And, at the time we knew it was going to be Portland as well, which probably many people don't know. But like I said, we had to be smart and strategic with how we played it. So it was announce a race and then have another announcement to kind of generate more interest. So there was a conversation for a long time. Obviously he wanted, I think in his world, he would rather have one driver of the whole season, and that hasn't happened. But we had the conversations quite early on to lead up to Mid-Ohio, and we knew for quite a while before it was public. So it was a secret which I didn't really want to hold on to, but, everyone was asking. I couldn't say anything, but that's what racing's like sometimes. I'd like to say there's more secrets which I've got now, but genuinely I don't.
Can you just talk about kind of what went into the Mid-Ohio weekend and all the variables? Because I remember writing about it at the time. Just off the top of my head, there was an unfamiliar hybrid system. You were driving an IndyCar after one test. It was a repaved track. Drivers say it was one of the most physical races they'd done. There were no cautions to kind of have a breather. First practice was wet. You had an issue in qualifying. That's a long list of stuff you kind of had to overcome that weekend.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because, like you said, there's a lot of things that got in the way, but again, it was just a weekend that flew past. It was taking as much as I could in as little time. And like you said, there was some rain in practice, which was like, oh man, we didn't get to even run the softer set of tires. So I've got no idea how they're going to respond. I don't know how much more physical it's going to be. And then obviously the same again at quali. We went out on the red set of tires and then didn't get to go out. So then it was like, man, I still don't know what these tires are like. And the next time I'm going to use them is in the race. So it was a steep learning curve for sure. Learning the steering wheel. That's one thing that is new or sort of different to IndyCar against everything else I've driven is you can make your own steering wheel. So learning how their procedures work and what's on their dash was the biggest thing for me. And especially when, it's an unfamiliar atmosphere that I'm in, the car's still relatively new. The weekend format's still new. The crew and team personnel are new. And there's a lot more things to absorb as well. So it was difficult, but everyone at DCR did a fantastic job of making it as easy and as simple as they could. But, like the hybrid system, there's an art to it. I think we've all established across the paddock, but it's not massively complex. It's a fairly simple system. You can make it complicated if you want, or you can simplify it. And I think they were just like, let's just do our bits, simplify it. You drive the car and just see how we get on. And again, obviously the result kind of felt a bit surreal. I was at the second pit stop. It was, I think we came out in 12th and I got in front of David and made a mistake and he got past, unfortunately. But, the dash saying P13 and it's like, yep, 4 laps to go. And it's like, no one's behind me. Like, we're going to stay P13. They're like, yep, like, keep going, like, keep it up, keep the pressure up. It kind of felt a bit surreal, It's like we've just started 24th or 23rd and we've come 13th. Like, that's fantastic. And everyone was super happy. But it was just, I think, a nice weekend of everyone's hard work and effort over the season. It's just come together. Some weekends do, some don't. Toronto definitely wasn't as good as Mid-Ohio on the 51 side, but that's racing, So it was difficult. It was tough, and I wouldn't moan about having to do it again. But at the same time, I'd also like an easier introduction to something if I was to do it next time. But yeah, I mean, like I said, in my eyes, jumping in a car and getting on with it and doing the job is fundamentally what it's about.
You know, we've not
Yep.
seen many repeat drivers in the car this year, but you did enough to warrant returning for Toronto. So I know you said Portland you knew well in advance, but did you see Mid-Ohio as almost like a trial, an opportunity for you to prove yourself? And then how did that develop into you finding out that you'd be in the car for Toronto?
Yeah, I mean, I always knew from back in 2019 that if you do well in a race, the doors kind of open up. And I mean, you only have to look at Linus last year when he did the 2 races, I believe, with Maya Shank, or one of each. But, you know, the jumping into the car and getting on and doing a good job does open doors. So I was very aware of that, and I kind of perhaps put a little bit of pressure on myself, saying, you know, like, I've got 2 races, but publicly I've got this one opportunity to make it count. It was difficult, but, you know, I didn't let that get in the way. At the end of the day, if you're worrying in your head about what if I make this mistake or what if I'm not fast enough, it doesn't help your performance. So it was focusing on just turning up and learning as much as I could and trying to lead the car and the team in the best direction possible for the weekend. And after that, you know, the team weren't exactly cold with me before, but they definitely warmed up to me after the weekend. I think the relationship built quite quickly and quite strong. And they're all great guys, you know. They get a bit of a hammering about the driver situation on social media, but at the same time, they're just, you know, people doing a job and a passion that they love. So they're all fantastic people, and they were very eager to get me back in for Toronto, as they hadn't had that confirmed. I was eager to do Toronto. We had to work hard to find some financial resources to do that. But again, the team were very cooperative and allowing me and helping me and assisting me to get everything together to do Toronto. So it's, you know, it's been kind of a double-edged sword of how we figure out how to do that race. So yeah, I mean, do well, it opens up doors.
Yeah, can you kind of take us through how Toronto kind of went? Like, it was your first on the street course. Did it plan out kind of how you expected, and kind of comparison to a Mid-Ohio?
Toronto's a physical track. You were saying Mid-Ohio was quite physical. It was physical, but in an expected way. But Toronto was physical in a very different way. The bumps, they're unforgiving and they're physical. So it wasn't how I'd want the weekend to go, but I think my first goal of the weekend was to finish the race. I knew, looking back of how races had gone previously, that if you survive, you have a good chance of getting a fairly decent result in terms of moving forward. I mean, just look at the result we achieved just from doing that. And I know Hunter obviously had a very different approach with one single event, and he's unfortunately did crash. But again, it just goes to show, like, it's much more important to finish the race than, you know, be super, super fast. And I hope Hunter gets another chance for sure, because he deserves it. But again, it was like I said, a very different approach for me. Finishing the race was key. I know the car's fighting for a position in the leaders circle, and, you know, if I put it in the wall, that I do nothing to help that team. And for me, it's about building something that teams can look at even now in the summer break and further around the silly season and go, he survived Toronto. He had a great result in Mid-Ohio. You know, we trust this kid can do the job. And I think, like I said, finishing is a task, but for sure, going down to the gym and getting a bit stronger for these cars is something that everyone has to do, and it's definitely on my agenda.
Do you then have any more future aspirations in the series? You obviously know it is so difficult with funding at the moment, but if things do come together, do you ever see IndyCar as a bigger option for you looking forward to 2025 and beyond?
100%. Yeah, we're working on some projects, which I can't really give too much information on, but on our end, we're working on some bits that are a puzzle piece for next year. Like I said earlier, there's obviously a lot of seats that are still available. There's going to be a lot of movement. There's obviously a new team coming in. So with the results, with experience in IndyCar, it's becoming a lot easier. However, there's still a lot of money that, you have to find, and different teams want different things. Some have sponsorship and funding themselves, others don't. So it's definitely something that we're working to now, and we have been for a couple of weeks and a couple of months, or a couple of years even. So we've got some sponsors on board for this year, and utilizing them for next year and giving something back that they want, and finding out what we can get, and kind of helping each other out to make it a achievable kind of goal for everyone. Something we can actually put together as a program is kind of what we're focused on at the moment. But there's definitely movement, progress on our end. It's just if we can put the right package together with the right team at the right time, and if those three things come together, then I think for me it's something that I'll be in for next year.
And obviously there are such limited opportunities to become a paid driver in a series like IndyCar. Can you just kind of discuss the challenge and kind of just the importance of really attracting partners, attracting sponsors? I know it's kind of a huge thing that's always discussed around motorsport. I think it'd be good to get kind of you as a driver's perspective on the work that is kind of undergone and the processes you have to undergo to get these partners on board.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that comes down to how I've had to get here. I've got a single mum and a single dad, and they've kind of come together and helped as much as they can to give me the opportunity. So it's not like we've just had the money to go and race. So we've had to be smart with it, and we've had to learn from a very early day how the kind of business of racing works. And it's something that my mum taught me from a very young age of racing's a business. It's a sport, but behind the scenes, it's a business. So she's a very switched on woman. She's from London. Well, not from London. She works in London. She's a city woman. She understands businesses. So she's been fundamental in kind of molding our minds to understand what companies want and what they get back out of racing, and something that is achievable, rather than you give me money, you get a stick on the car. No one's interested in that anymore, especially when money's so tight for people. So it's been about kind of having a product to sell as well as that. I mean, you've got to be personable, you've got to be likable, you've got to be friendly, you've got to be fast. There's a lot of elements that me as a driver has to do, as well as understanding how sponsorship works. And I think that's really the reason why I'm here, kind of having that understanding. So again, over the winter and over the summer, we've been working with people to kind of figure out, how IndyCar is as a selling point, and figuring out where and what and who we can target to bring on as a partner, not a sponsor. But I can't really summarize it as a whole because I'll be here for hours. So it's a difficult process, and it's one that a lot of drivers do fall down at that hurdle, not because of they're not good enough or they don't understand it, but because it's just such a difficult game. That's limited, no one's going to spend 10 million a year for the next 20 years just so their kid can race. Like, it's just, unless you're obscenely rich, it's not something that is sustainable. And I think that's a big thing that these days, everything is sustainable. And trying to break away from that pay driver is difficult. But again, I think pay driver and bringing sponsorships are different kind of ball. But again, there's teams out there that have the means and resources to pay you, and they have those business and B2B, packages that they can find a way for you to become a paid driver. So I think getting in, bringing the money and the sponsorship, and then being a marketable enough driver that, be fast enough, get podium results and do the job on track, but also be able to be a sellable item off track is really, how you break away from that, becomes something that people will pay you for.
What's it like being a driver who never has had any concrete plans in their career because it's been so dependent on budget? And what's the feeling like of just not having any certainty throughout your entire career?
So it's quite stressful, I can't lie. But it's something that I'm used to, you know. This is just for me how racing is, and I think if it ever comes to a point where I've got, you know, a 3-year IndyCar contract, I'm going to be like, well, what do I do? Just go to the gym and drive now. So it's stressful for sure, and I think, you know, it's taken a toll on my family. It's taken a toll on me. It's taken a toll on the team that I've got around me in racing. But you know, that's the sacrifice and the effort that it takes to become a professional racing driver. It's not how I would have liked to have got to this situation where, you know, we're still having to put everything, all the blood, sweat and tears and effort into finding money to race, but that is what it takes. And that's, you know, one of the reasons why I'm still here. It's just keep chipping away, and every year we kind of hope next year is going to be the one. Next year is going to be the year it switches, and there will be a point. It's just when and in what in.
Well, what are your goals going to be for like the remaining drive at Portland this season? And then do you feel a need to almost put yourself in the shop window ahead of the driver market kind of heating up?
I've got to be in the shop window already. Yeah, for sure. It's like I've said, I've had a great time in IMSA and P2, and you know, if that's where my career is, then I'm going to make a fantastic life for myself. It's a great series, racing fantastic cars with great drivers. So there's no failure at all, nor is GT racing. But for me, like, IndyCar is my goal. Hopefully I'm putting myself in the window with the driving side. It's also now utilizing it off track. In terms of Portland, again, the goal at Toronto was to beat P13. You know, we got close, but in the not correct kind of way. However, again, you know, try and improve on P13. If we can't, at least beat P15. It's difficult, I know, and I understand and appreciate that is in IndyCar. It's a very difficult task, but if you set the boundary high and you miss, you still achieve something well. You know, if I go in to go, just want to finish the race or do well, you know, it's not really pushing yourself. And I think in racing, you have to strive to do sometimes better than is realistic to kind of achieve those results.
And something I like to ask all of the drivers that we have on is just, how would you kind of explain IndyCar or the appeal of IndyCar to, well, I guess in your case, British sports fans or motorsport fans that may know about F1 but don't know about IndyCar? Like, do you have anything that you would say to them, or any ideas as to how maybe IndyCar could expand over here in the UK?
Oh, it's a difficult question. I think it's $1 million marketing question. I'd explain it as chaotic raw motorsports, but chaotic in a good way. It's a spectacle of what racing can be when the cars are all the same. For me, I don't think there is any better open wheel racing on the planet. You know, you've got probably 30 of the best drivers on the planet in some fantastic machinery. Honda and Chevrolet do a fantastic job of providing equal engines. You know, Firestone give us a great tire. Dallara have always been good at everything they've done. So it's the series and the racing is there. In terms of bringing it over to the UK, I'd love to be an ambassador. I'd love to get a full-time drive and, you know, come and bring one over here and do some laps at race weekends and just show people what the car is. Because I think as soon as they hear and see it, they'll be hooked. You know, it's a visceral sport. People want to hear it. They want to smell it. They want to feel it. And I think IndyCar still holds on to some of those key elements where you can hear and feel it. And I think that is one of its biggest assets, as well as the racing being, like I said, chaotic, but in a fun and entertaining way.
What is a fun fact about yourself that people may not know?
Ooh. I've got the cutest dog. Period. I haven't got a photo. He's not here at the moment, but yeah, everyone goes, "Oh, I've got the cutest dog," but no, I genuinely have the cutest dog on the planet.
Do you have any hidden talents?
Being the noisiest neighbour with music. Honestly, I don't know. There probably is something, but I was very good at hurdles at school, so I think like my rhythm and coordination in respects is quite good, but I don't think I've still kept that, being, you know, much older than I was at school. Hidden talents. I don't know. I don't think you get up to enough outside of racing and doing my normal life. So no, but I'll work on that. I'll see if I can find something that is peculiar.
Were you watching the hurdles at the Olympics?
I actually didn't. I missed that, unfortunately.
Yeah, we've had a few other drivers on who've been all over the Olympics. So also quite big. In the
Yeah,
US.
I mean, for as much as I could watch, I was there. But, you know, like I said, I was out having barbecues and, you know, playing top golf and having some few golf games, which is definitely not one of my talents by any stretch. So yeah, I didn't see as much of it as I'd have liked to, but yeah, it was also a bit annoying America winning for the sole reason that every American friend has been rubbing it in. So
we've not got this on the
question, but yeah,
we've not got this on the question agenda. But do you play any other sports other than golf and other than motorsport, of course?
Not really. I used to BMX as a kid. Anything kind of with wheels, I'm into. Any kind of ball sport, I'm into. Really like playing cricket. Much easier to hit than a golf ball in my eyes. But no, I'm super chilled out with kind of getting involved with sports. Anything I'll give a go. You know, I'm not one of these people that sees a sport they don't like and go, nah, I'll never try it. Used to play rugby at school as well, but far too small for that, so I used to get battered. But again, no, I love all sports. They've all got their own kind of skill set to them, and it's like racing. Everything that you do has much more depth to it than you imagine. So I kind of appreciate the guys for what they do, but no, I'm definitely not going to play any Olympic sport sometime soon.
What's your favourite track, both at home and internationally?
Ooh, it's difficult. Before this year, my favourite track globally, I would have said, was Qatar. I'd driven it in MRF, which is basically a 2-litre Renault years ago. And I just clicked with the place. It's high speed, it's flowing, it's ballsy. And that's the kind of track I like. So it kind of matches with my new favourite, which was Watkins Glen. Like, love the track. It's one that I'd never been to, but I kind of held in high regard and kind of hoped to go to, and kind of like never meet your idol because they disappoint. It was kind of that situation where I hope it didn't disappoint, and it didn't. It was such a good track. So I'd say that's probably my favourite outside of the UK/globally. In the UK, it's going to sound boring, but Silverstone, like, I don't know. It's that high speed, flowy nature track that I really, really enjoy. Letting a car kind of spread its legs and just see what it can do, you know, throwing it into a corner and going, if I do get this wrong, I'm hitting up that wall quite hard. I quite like that high speed nature of racetracks.
Qatar and Silverstone are my two favourite tracks on the F1 game. So
really,
yeah.
Okay.
Again, it's the flowy nature from my non-driver's point of view. I just like the flowy nature of them both.
Honestly, incredible tracks. If you ever get the chance to drive them, I don't know if you have, so forgive me if I got that wrong, but take the opportunity. They're so much fun. Like, anything with a bit of camera in the right way and high speed, just you'll have a great time.
What's your ideal holiday destination, both in the UK and abroad?
Japan, abroad. I know it's far, and I know it's not a beach and sunny like everyone really says, but I was fortunate enough to do Super Trofeo Asia. When we went to Fuji and Suzuka, and each time I went there, I loved it. Just an incredible place, super friendly people, super clean. It was just an incredible place to be. Every minute of every day I was loving life. Kind of could intertwine with an interesting fact. Like, I'm big into my old Japanese cars. Kind of, you know, the import stuff, the JDM stuff. I've always loved them. The first car I bought, which wasn't my first car, was a Mark 1 MX-5 from 1992. So it was, you know, 4 years older than me, and I've still got it to this day. So I'm a big lover of Japanese culture and cars, so it's fitting that I'm racing with Honda. But Yeah, in the UK, I've got a family member that lives in Norfolk, and that's always really beautiful. Haven't spent much time in Scotland, so I think maybe somewhere up there, like the Isle of Skye, looks really nice. I definitely think I'll go north, not south, for a holiday. I've been south quite a lot, but I've never been up north, so I think that would be my destination.
We've got a couple more. We know you're good friends with Jake Dennis, and Jake Dennis has a lot of travel disasters. What is your biggest travel disaster, is what we want to know.
It was actually with him a few weeks ago. We did the race at the Nürburgring, and we try and get back on the same day if possible. And we managed to get a flight that evening at 10 o'clock, I think, or was supposed to be at 10 o'clock. Didn't happen, got cancelled. So we both sat there. Unfortunately, we hadn't gone through the gate because when we were on the way to the airport, it got delayed by 2 hours. So we just went to, unfortunately, Mackey's, which was the only thing that they had to have some food. And we were sat there, and there was obviously a gate sign, and it was delayed 2 hours. So we're like, oh. And then it got to about an hour, and then it was delayed half an hour again. And then it was delayed another half an hour. We're like, man, this is going to be like 2 a.m. And then it was cancelled. So Jake's got an actual account for his traveling struggles. And the one time I think I've flown with him this year, it's a cancelled flight. So he's definitely cursed for traveling for some reason. I don't know what he's done in a past life or behind the scenes, but it was with him, ironically, after the Nürburgring this year. And it wasn't too bad because the hotel, which was at the airport, had like a big bar/party on the roof. So we just kind of went in there and gate crashed and had a bit of a good time. So yeah, it was silver linings of a cancelled trip.
And kind of on the topic of parties, we basically have a Spotify playlist for every driver who joins us on the podcast. Have you got 2 songs you would like to add to that playlist for us, please?
I had some questions, some songs in my head the other day that was like, that's such a good song. This should be one that I say every time when someone asks. Famax by Rafa Guido, I think it's how I pronounce it. And the other one is Hot Since 82, and the song's called Eye of the Storm.
Okay, cool. That'll go well.
They're the ones I can think off the top of my head.
That'll go well with Stingray Rob's old country music from like the 80s. So
okay, so that's one thing that I really am not a fan of, is country music. I can't get behind it. I hear it and I appreciate it, but I just really don't like it.
Callum Islet had some, I think. Tom Bronkfist was more modern house rap sort of stuff. Yeah. So
okay, that's fine. I can get along with Tom. Did you actually ask them where they're all born and if they're actually all from Cambridge? Because it seems like we're all from Cambridge.
I haven't, to be honest. No.
Wikipedia says like every racing. I think Jack's from. Is he from up in Lincoln? Jack Harvey.
Yeah.
Catherine Legge. She was born
She was
born the same town as me. So.
Oh really?
Connection there. Both born in Guildford. Cool. Yeah.
Were you actually born in Cambridge?
Yeah, I was born in Addenbrooke's, which is the main hospital in Cambridge. So, like, I'm claiming if there's anyone that is genuinely from Cambridge, I'm taking that title. That's me. But they could also be born there, so I don't know.
I'm yet to find an IndyCar driver from Manchester. So,
yeah, I mean, Tom seems to represent everybody. So,
yeah. Okay, so I'll knock him off the throne. I don't know about Callum. I think he's from around here as well, but I'm claiming it.
Maybe it's a Cambridge thing where you're all destined for IndyCar. Anyway, Toby, that's all we got for you. Thanks for your time. We really wish you the best of luck in Portland, and obviously best of luck looking forward to next year. Well, hopefully we might see you in a bigger capacity. But thanks for your time, and hope you enjoy joining us on the podcast.
No, thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure, and all I'll say is there are some projects that we're working on for next year in IndyCar. But there are lots of them, and I can't give any one more indication than another. So hopefully at least by the end of the season, I'll know more. But yeah, keep your eyes out.
Wish you the very best.
Welcome back. anytime. But for the viewers and listeners, really hope you enjoyed. Thanks very much for watching. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll hopefully see you next time.